Okay. Yeah, perfect. All right. Hey, everybody. Again, it was so, Matt, I'm going to have to, when we're done here, I need to hear the rest of the story about the $10,000 bottle of wine that we got halfway through before we started.
Perfect.
God.
Just to clarify, Blair, though, Matt didn't drink the $10,000 bottle, but we did. No. We got that. We established that.
Yeah, we're on the run up to that. Welcome to everybody to our series on what we call our Money On framework on how you use feedback and member experience and putting member experience at the center of your strategy, and start with some introductions. Start with Matt. I've known Matt Remick, I think, since you came on to Roundtable 2. What year?
2012.
2012, you came on to Roundtable 2. Shortly after that, I don't know if you remember this, you and I were sitting on a panel at URSA.
I do.
And, there were questions coming. You just started as an MXM customer at that time, and there were questions coming about feedback and how to use feedback. And Matt relayed the story of a member who has been a longtime member, and he saw her feedback, and it was very negative about personal training. She had this very negative experience. And so Matt was mortified and reached out to her and said, God, just want to make sure everything's okay. And she said, no, it's fine. It happened 10 years ago.
It was spa. It was actually spa. I remember.
It was a spa. It was something like that. But it was just demonstrative of what an experience is. It's a set of memories that can be resolved or not, or they're net positive or not. So anyway, I love that story. I'm Blair McHaney. I'm CEO of MXM and co-founder of MXMetrics. Been in the fitness business almost 40 years. Matt, well, you know what? I'm going to have you introduce last. Jen is our VP of Success. Jen. Hi.
Yeah, we been with MXM since we started in 2012, but it was also Blair's GM for 18 years prior to that. So been in the fitness industry not quite 40 years, but pretty darn close. So yeah, I love meeting all the people all over doing this job, like Matt.
Like Matt, and that is one of the things, right? The people, our customers are people that are really pretty much a lot of fun to work with, and Matt, you certainly are one of those. Why don't you give us a little bit of timeline of your leadership at Rochester Athletic Club in Rochester, Minnesota? And if you have not been there, you have to get a chance to go there. And you got to tour the entire thing, including what they call their neighborhood. It is an amazing facility. And Matt, why don't you give us a little bit of timeline of Rochester and your leadership there?
Yeah, thanks, Blair and Jenny. So yeah, I've been at the Rochester Athletic Club since 2000. I'm second generation owner. My father and some other gentlemen started it in 93, but I joined in 2000. I started buying shares in 2003, and then I bought additional shares. We bought out 2 partners in 2008. I became the president of the club at that point. And just last year, my dad purchased the last partner out. But in between all this time, I've been buying shares from my dad. So it's down to my dad and myself. I'm in the majority owner. So I've been here and in the fitness industry. It'll be 22 years in September. And it's just a great industry to be a part of. I don't worry about what we're doing because it should have a positive impact on people. And I'm blessed to have a great team. In 2012, kind of made a shift in the organization. We'll talk probably a little bit about that, where I got to put my management team in place. We had a shift from where my dad's team was in place. And so that's really where I kind of say my leadership changed and took over.
Yeah, so and the reason we have Rochester Athletic Club on here, I'm going to quick, just sort of a review of what this series has been about. We've called it Money on the Ground, Money on the Table, Money on the Balance Sheet. And in the first one, we really focused on this money on the ground concept, right? And the money on the ground concept is you're constantly taking in feedback from members, and you have an opportunity to save, service, or sell in a single piece of feedback. And it's money on the ground because it's just a one-on-one, one employee impacting one member, super easy to do, very technology dependent. This is where your technology sort of is the story, right? The closed loop feedback process, the workflows, how to make that really easy. As you move up to money on the table, we refer to that to money on the table because there's really actually more money to make there. There's a better ROI there. You don't want to give up the money on the ground, but there's a little better ROI on money on the table. And that's when you're finding an issue with a cohort. So in other words, people that use the locker rooms in the morning, women, men, members of a certain age, members who, schedule everything online. And when you find issues with that stuff or opportunities with that stuff, then you empower a team to create new process or new policy or new business practice, and it impacts an entire cohort. And there's more money to be made there than even the money on the ground. But money on the balance sheet, and this is why Rochester is such a great story here, because Matt has been about culture from day one in his leadership. And as we go through when we get to your mission statement here, it's why technology that helps with member experience has been very central to what Rochester Athletic Club has done. But there's huge proof in the profitability and the growth of Rochester Athletic Club under Matt's leadership and with literally putting the member at the center of everything they do. When you think about these three things, and we were talking this in the pre-show, money on the ground, you think about the technology, and of course we're member experience metrics, and that's the technology we're going to talk about, but the technology is the story. I mean, that is the main ingredient to picking up money on the ground. When you move up to money on the table, that technology is one of 4 ingredients or so, right? You got to have the technology, you got to have a willingness to change, you got to have change management, you got to have an excellent root cause practice. Those 4 things really sort of make up the money on the table piece. When you move up to money on the balance sheet, it's one of many ingredients. So the technology is now, and so this is why in this, we're going to talk about a lot of those other ingredients other than that technology. But it's sort of like leaving salt out of chili, right? You don't get the chili perfect until you have all the ingredients right. So this is why we're with Rochester Athletic Club and Matt here. And Jenny, jump in if there's anything you want me to just.
I'm just trying to figure out the salt out of chili. That was random.
Salt, it tastes freaking horrible. You can go completely wrong if you don't have the right ingredient. The first ingredient I want to start with, though, Matt, is your mission statement, and let's start there and just take us through.
Sure. So our mission statement is member experience first. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward, pretty blunt. And when I took over in 2012, we had a longer, I guess took over is the wrong word. When my team came into place, we took and really analyzed the mission, the cultural values, and really wanted to frame those within our own words. So about a year after I started, we took a trip away from the club. The general manager, assistant general manager, human resource director, and myself, and we focused outside the business on the business and rewrote the mission statement and the values. And the mission statement used to be 16 words. And so just the idea of, we have a lot of part-time people. We have 300 employees, normally 350 in the summer, and about 50 of those are full-time. It's not really fair for me to expect a new hire at the front desk to understand and live a 16-word statement. So we reduced it to 3, and member experience first. And we talk about it often. And really, sometimes the member experience first means you have to address somebody who's doing something wrong that's having a negative impact on a bunch of members. That's still putting the member experience first. It isn't always just giving the members what they want.
Right. So then, if I'm a new associate and I'm coming into, what is you have a new member onboarding or orientation?
Yeah, new associate. Yep.
New associate orientation. First of all, how frequently do you do the new associate orientation?
So the new associate orientation we do 3 to 4 times a year, depending on the turn and the hiring.
Okay.
Yeah.
And take us through that. Like, what do you invest in that as far as time and?
So it's the general manager, myself, and our HR director, and some of the other directors come in too from time to time. But really, it's a 90-minute window that we ask everybody who's hired during, the time leading up to that. It's really part of their onboarding paperwork. They see right away when the next one is scheduled so that they can clear their calendar and make every attempt to make it. If somebody has to come to the next one, it's not a big deal, but we try to get them at the first one we can, because we go through, I get up and explain the mission statement, why that's important. I get up and explain our 8 values, why those are important, and how we really treat those as, if these resonate with you, you'll be happy here. If they don't, you probably won't be happy here, because this is how we do business, but that's okay. It's okay if this isn't the place for you. We need people who this is the place for, and we really try to hire from our values. We can teach the skills for a lot of, the initial jobs. Some of them you have to hire for a blend of this, like tennis pros. You have to hire somebody who can do those tennis skills, but you also want to look and make sure they're a good cultural fit, because that will make them happy, more productive, better for the members, just all sorts of those things. So it's a 90-minute training, and then every single department does a building a culture of excellence training that is either right before or right after, and so the director kind of echoes and goes through the mission statement, the values, and then they go into the department specifics and how they apply there.
So they're taking ownership, and it's probably no coincidence that in your list of core values, the very first one is empower all associates.
That is the first one. Now, I don't have them in any particular order, and I usually say that, but to me, it's an essential part of, we hired these people to do the jobs that they do because of the skills and the personality they bring to the job. So it would be foolish for me to tell a yoga instructor how to teach a yoga class. It would be a worse experience for our members if I did that. That's why we hired them. They're naturally either outgoing or knowledgeable in that area. So we try to really empower them and get out of the way, give them kind of, here's the frame of what we need, show up on time, do the things that we need to do. But we really don't say it has to be this. They're really empowered to do that. And if they see a better way, one of our values is to challenge the process, communicate that with us. We don't feel like we have everything perfect. If you're still doing business the same way you were 10 years ago, you're going to be way behind, because the smartphone has changed everything. So you have to continually change. And yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to back up just a little bit and level set. So for you guys, for Rochester, your NPS, your key metrics, so your member experience scores are top of the charts, right? You guys are always at the top of the charts. But what I love about this conversation is, and when we were talking about having Matt come in here, is like, member experience is everything, right? And you guys provide such a stellar experience that when you walk in, you can feel the culture. You can feel your guys' mission statement. But when we started having this conversation, it started with employees. And that's kind of a differentiator. And that's why I think you're on this part of the conversation, because it's like the employee experience is so important, because those are the people delivering that experience that you want your members to have. And like Blair said, it's no coincidence that that's where we're starting, because that's where you guys start.
I think that is such a great point, Jenny. So and I think this is when we say money on the balance sheet, it is when the entire organization organically is driving the mission of the company without the leader having to, push and prod everybody. And Matt, so when we were talking about, setting some of the goals, how departments set their goals, he said they do that on their own, right? I mean, they understand the mission statement, they understand the values. The leaders of the departments get their teams together, and they decide how to move the needle on staff friendliness for their department or whatever that is. And so, God, I just can't. So many. Whenever we talk about this stuff, so many of these things always take me back to the book Prime to Perform, right, by Neil Doshi, Lindsay McGregor, and the three most positive motivators: play, purpose, potential. And you are giving them the ability to play, right? I mean,
yeah, we really try to do that, because that's why we hire them. We hire them they are the member experience. I may, own the business, but I'm doing the background stuff, and I'm really trying to give people the opportunity to be successful. And so we talk about MXM during the initial new associate orientation, so everybody knows what it is. We give them the exact dashboard the day of the training on where things are at. So we're trying to be as transparent. We go through the good and the bad comments we get from people, and we really try to push on, our club it's large, it's 260,000 square feet. We have and that's under roof, and we have 15 different departments, right? You can have a great experience on the fitness floor, but if you get to the locker room and it's a mess, that negatively impacts it. So we really try to make sure they understand that every role is critical in their own way for having a great member experience, and every role is important, and that's why you're here and you're valuable.
And when it becomes deliberate like that, what Jenny was describing is when you go in there, you can actually feel it, like everybody's on the same page. You realize, yet the company didn't get lucky when they hired that person. It was part of a deliberate process, right? It's not, and it's throughout the entire organization. So this getting the culture, getting the institutional logic is what I call it. The vision, mission, values. These are all of the pieces that you're allowing them to put together in a way that makes sense to them. Use the values. Here's the playing field, and you're empowering them to go play with that, right? Use their intellect to come up with ways to make sure member experience is first, which is our mission every single day. Okay.
Right. And then my role is to make sure that people are following the values, and use those to coach people when maybe they aren't, or use them to reward people when they go above and beyond, or they're setting stellar examples of those values.
Okay, that's a perfect lead into where I want to go next. So I've seen this where people have the member experience vision, they get everything down, and then they put in compensation plans that just kill all of the intrinsic motivation. And pretty soon people are trying to argue away data, and they get their comp plans wrong, and it does violence to the member experience instead of supporting the member experience. So I want to talk a little bit about how you shifted compensation, and especially the rack rewards piece.
Sure.
So I think that was really, that's unique.
So, compensation is probably one of the trickiest things as a business owner. You want to make sure you're paying people fair. You want to make sure that, you are rewarding people for the skills they bring to the job, the responsibilities of the job. So setting for us, the base rate is really important. And that comes through, time and institutional knowledge. And one of the beauties of being in a roundtable group is that I can bounce those off of other people. Now, every market's a little different. I'm also in a local family business roundtable, so we can bounce those off of each other. But really, our incentive plan, which is above and beyond just your pay, is I was talking about it in one of the roundtables early on, and somebody recommended the Great Book of Business by Jack Stack, I believe. And so I read it, and during that, he preaches some really good ideas. It's the tying it to the financials, making sure people can figure these things out on their own. So I'm trying to do the best I can by making it people understand what it is. But each department kind of only sees their part of the puzzle. So what we did is I essentially have three groups: my executive team, my director's team, and then key staff that are eligible for an annual incentive. And what it is each director sets their own budget for the year. Now they have to meet and have it approved with the executive team, which is the GM, assistant GM, human resource director, finance director, and myself. So we kind of agree on that. And then each piece goes together, and we have our net for the bottom of the club, what our net line is, that we all agree that this is our target, this is reasonable for the year. As owners, anything above that target, we give 50% back to fund the incentive plan. And each bucket, so the exec team, directors, and key staff get it. And they get their piece based on what percentage of overall payroll they are in that group. So it is aligned with responsibility, but they all get mathematically the same percentage of their annual pay as an incentive. So it's fair. And then the only slight thing is if each department doesn't hit within, we give them a 5% cushion because life happens, things change. But if they're like, say they're at 90% of their goal versus 100, we take 10% of what they would have got out of their incentive and fund what we call a reward pool with it. We also take 10% of the overall that goes to those three groups into the reward pool. And what we use that is to fund the rewards you were talking about, Blair, which they have to be immediate. When somebody does something good, somebody communicates with us and nominates somebody for a rack reward gift. So it's usually based on supporting our values or going above and beyond our values. And the other requirement is that it has to be personalized. And so that gets submitted to our RAC executive team. We review them. We try to make sure that they're fair. So somebody doesn't get $1,000 for this and, you know, $5 for this. We try to make sure they're kind of fair. It gives us a chance to all be aware of the good things going on. And then usually myself and that director meet with that employee and give them whatever the personalized gift is. I've given a chainsaw away. One of our people loves to golf and we got them green fees for them and somebody else on one of the golf courses that's harder to get into. We will give like dinner, you know, gift cards to places where people like to go to dinner. But we really try to personalize it and reinforce when people do what we need from a mission statement. And then, you know, the compensation is annual because the business is seasonal. But everybody gets to share in the success of the business when the business does well.
So I got to jump on that because the idea that it's an annual incentive is one of the most important pieces in getting this right. Like I always said, if the higher you move, when it comes to, especially if you're going to incentivize things around member experience, especially that, the higher you are off the ground, in other words, CEO, and the slower the cadence, in other words, annual, the safer the incentive. The closer you are to the ground and the more rapid the incentive, the more dangerous it is. In other words, let's just go to the extreme and say, okay, I'm gonna give you $1 every time you say hi to somebody. That just becomes very transactional, and it just rips all of the intrinsic motivation out of people. The way that you have it set up is so perfect because it doesn't have me focusing on single tasks that I have to do and whether that one task is going to help or hurt me, like at the end of the month, right? So I love that cadence. The other thing, when we did the Medallia Institute some years ago, when we wrote that, we talked about rewards, awards, incentives, and recognition. It has 4 different levers you can use. You're using your incentive like perfectly. Rewards is exactly how you do it, right? We think of them as ad hoc and sort of personalized and surprised. You can point and shoot, right? Mm-hmm. That happened. Awards are more formal. There's a transparent process. It's the annual most improved in a franchise. It's the, and then recognition is, and you use recognition a lot. It's just calling out people when you get great comments or handwriting somebody a note. And all 4 of those things can go so far in embedding a, member experience culture in the organization. And for anybody listening out there says, yeah, but God, how much does all that cost? It isn't just the rack rewards and how that's set up. That's a piece of an entire system that you've put together around this culture. You can't just inspect that one piece and say, I'm going to do that one thing, and I'm going to have the same success. This has been a very holistic approach. Can you give us percentage-wise? Give us some percents from 2012, let's forget the pandemic here, and to 2019 of growth, revenue overall or profit overall. Can you give us some of those percentages?
I sure can. I left out one little thing I want to clarify about the way we do our bonus program too, is every month, every quarter, the director team sees how everybody is doing department wise and bottom line on where we're trending towards that annual incentive. So there's no surprise. Right. They're not surprised if we miss it. They're not surprised when we hit it. And that part is important. That's perfect. And there's team accountability. If somebody is really struggling, we don't see a blame. We see people coming in to help. And that's good teamwork, in my opinion.
The other
But
thing, Matt, before you give the percentages, one thing that caught my ear was like, so if you have this poll, then it's always kind of being fed, and it's kind of a group effort and everybody's participating. So when things are lean, like during COVID or 2008, when the clubs are having a hard time, you still have that poll to be able to tell your employees, you're still important. We thank you. Right? I mean,
100%.
So
We were
that-
able to
that's always
use
there.
that to recognize moments that were amazing during the last 2 years because we already had that money funded.
I like that.
So
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. And to answer your question, if I look at the net profit of where we were in 2011, so using the year right before I made the big change, to 2019, we grew our profit 333%
Oh my God.
by adding all these different
That's
changes,
incredible.
successes. I would say instead of salt in the chili, our 11 herbs and spices. If you want, you can use KFC's recipe, metaphor, but it wasn't
That's
one
awesome.
singular event. It was a bunch of events that had a cumulative success together.
Yeah,
You know-
that's. Oh, go ahead, Jenny.
I was just going to say, I know that we have a few questions we got to get to, but one of the things that, Matt, you're really great about giving your team credit and kudos. And I'm familiar with, a lot of your team, and they are truly wonderful people. But one thing that you said in a conversation before, you had noticed that some scores were coming in that weren't normal for you, right? They weren't great, some feedback. And you, as the owner leader of the company, I think you said something like 10 to 15 hours a week you allotted to being on the floor and trying to discover really what was happening. And to me, that just speaks volumes as a leader to not only your team, but to your members to go, member experience matters, or what member experience first, or whatever I forgot exactly what your mission statement is.
You just got
But
it.
that's how important it is. You live and breathe it, right? From top down. And that's transformative right there.
I think that's a great idea. Talk through what that story was, Matt.
So briefly, we've got 3 basketball courts as part of our gym. You realize we're in Minnesota, so that's part of the reason we're the size we are, is there's a long indoor season in Minnesota. But some of the basketball was creating, language issues because we're a family-focused club, some noise issues, and then some behavioral issues by not picking up after themselves, being just being inconsiderate of other members in their area, whether it was in the locker room after basketball or not. So our scores started to reflect, some negative experiences from people being impacted who didn't play basketball by what was going on the basketball court. And we're still slowly addressing it and making progress. But we decided that we had to change some things about what we are going to allow down there. We wanted to hold people accountable for correct language. We wanted to hold them accountable for picking up, and we started to take away the baskets earlier at night to try and curb behavior. But before we did any of that, I scheduled 10 hours, and I sat down and I talked to the noon ball guys 2 hours on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I came in on the 2 busiest nights, talked to the the high schoolers, middle schoolers, on I think it was Tuesday and Thursday, and I walked out and talked to them all and just let them know that this stuff is coming. I'm not singling anyone out, but as a group collectively, we're having negative impacts on other members. And if I need to get rid of basketball long-term, not an empty threat, like if it affects our members' experience the way it was, I will find another use for this space. I don't want to, but I will.
And
That's amazing.
This is the understanding that member experience is your product. That's literally the product. And so if this is causing defects in the product, I mean, you could take like a Six Sigma approach to this. If this is now putting a defect in the product, then we have to fix that defect. I think that is one of the biggest lessons to learn in this whole thing. When you're really driving culture, remember, member experience is the product, and you have to be able to measure the quality of that product continuously and then take action when there are defects in the product.
Right. And right now we're using a hammer and chisel, trying to change some things and not a sledgehammer to just destroy things. But if it comes to the point where we need to use the sledgehammer, we will.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. Okay, so I'm going to move to something else really practical. And it's about your, how you changed your equipment. And I'm going to share something first real quick here. And you guys, I have talked about this approach a lot. And so I just want to show how Matt actually used this approach, whether he's looking at this framework or not. These are the behaviors you see in companies that are really the money on the balance sheet. And the money on the balance sheet companies always get the money on the table and the money on the ground. They've moved through this framework. But the idea is that you have your member experience vision in the middle, which in this case is simply member experience first. Member experience, always member experience first. That is the mission. And then you've heard Matt talk about some of the policies just when he's talking about basketball. He's willing to change some policies down there. They bring the baskets up earlier. They, in order to protect, in order to serve the member experience vision, and then plant equipment and programming. And sometimes I think people just think we have to have a, really good plan. We do, and you've done amazing things with the physical plant there over the years to address that. But with equipment, it's like, which equipment should we buy? And then the voice of customers should come in and inform all of these bands and keep you on track. Okay, with that, I want to talk about what your approach was when you were going out to equipment, to purchase equipment, what it used to be, and then how you used customer feedback and a thoughtful approach in order to make sure that when you're buying equipment, it keeps serving the mission of the company and it's not detached, it's not unmoored from the mission.
Yeah, so, that 2012, 2013, a lot of change went on. We made a lot of good decisions. This is another 2013 story. And, hopefully continually we've made good decisions since that have fed into things. But in 2013, we were at URSA. And really it was the assistant general manager, the general manager, and myself, and we're looking at the new equipment. And we had Medallia or MXM for a few months. And we were getting feedback, not just there, but through our conversation cards is what we call them, versus comment cards, which we redesigned to put contact information on the top and let them know that we intend on following up with them, whether it's a positive experience or negative. And then we fill out and they put what their issue is underneath. Before we had their signature at the bottom, and we would get vomit on the card and no signature. So it's really allowed us to close loop on that. But we were getting a lot of feedback that we didn't have enough equipment. And I was looking out at the floor going, I think we have enough equipment. As an owner, that's one of the things. But we used to go and buy $50,000 to $75,000 worth of new equipment every year. And then our maintenance person would keep it alive and Frankenstein it sometimes for several years. Good from an ownership perspective because it's cheaper. But when we got to URSA that year, Precor, Life Fitness, Matrix, and Technogym all had usernames and passwords. And then things got a little deeper in some of their displays. They didn't quite have, the Netflix and the Hulus yet. That came a little bit later, but allowed members to interact and record their history and their workout. And we were sitting there talking one night at URSA, and really it just dawned on me of, okay, typically we buy whoever has the best treadmill, whoever has the best elliptical. And if we do that approach, we're going to have usernames and passwords, which, by the way, we aren't in charge of the experience of resetting the password. But we have usernames and passwords where people forget, our members don't always know if they're on a Precor treadmill and a Matrix bike and this and that. So we really decided we should investigate going with one line of equipment, leasing and renewing every so often. And so we moved forward with that plan. I looked at the finances of that, and I needed to have an extra 100 members a year and keep that. So I needed to gain 100 members a year and keep that in order to pay the difference between that 50 to 75 versus leasing at, it was about 14 a month. So it was quite a bit more expensive. But I'm happy to say we gained 287 net members in that first year, and we kept growing until the pandemic. So it ended up being a good decision. Our cardio gets turned every 4 years, and from the members' experience, what we found, we got no comments about not having enough equipment after that, because they could log on and use a treadmill, and if all the treadmills were full, they could go over to an elliptical or an AMT, because we chose Precor, or bike. They were familiar enough with the interface that they could log on and use it till something they wanted opened up. So it made the member experience better as a result. Plus, technology is changing, where that 4-year cadence is pretty good. Wired headphones were all you needed to have access to 8 years ago. But about starting, Bluetooth now is really important to have on your equipment, or your equipment feels old. It may or may not be old, but everybody has the earbuds. So if they can't connect to the equipment using that, it feels old. And that's part of the member experience too. So our stuff turns every 4 years. We have a 4-year parts on it. Our tech is certified in Precor. We get to stock less. We have less downtime. We have a better relationship with the vendor. It's just a better situation all in all.
I
love this, right? I mean, just a consistent experience of login experience on all of the cardio.
You know what's interesting is I just had a conversation with, I think it was Aaron yesterday, who was talking about, some scores with a customer, and they was like, gosh, I don't understand why people are just, our equipment scores are super low, and it's brand new stuff. I mean, it's, like 4 years ago, we got this, this, and this. I'm like, to us, that probably isn't old, right? I mean, you're still paying the bill a lot of times on that equipment, but to the member, like, it's 4 years old, it's antiquated, right? That caught my, yeah.
Well, plus the idea, I think, and Milwaukee Tools did this some years ago. They were looking for a new revenue line, and they had gone out in the field and looked at their big contractors, and they were using Clayton Christensen's jobs to be done framework when they were analyzing the job to be done of a contractor. To summarize, they realized the job to be done for a contractor was not to own and catalog assets, right? Like every frickin' drill motor and, Sawzall and whatever. And so they spun up a little project where it was subscription-based equipment. And you could subscribe at different levels to the equipment, and they owned it. They cataloged all the equipment. And then they would come in, and the subscription that this contractor would have said, just keep me up to date. I want the latest and greatest. If you come out with something that's, from 18 volts to 20 volts, I need the 20 volts, just keep it going. And they would just come in, they would catalog the equipment and replace it, and it became wildly profitable for them. And then the contractors didn't have to worry about kind of, maintaining all these assets on the balance sheet and everything. It was just a freaking subscription. And I felt like, and there's been for a handful of years when I've been able to speak at Precor too. I've said this is an innovation I'd love to see in our industry, and it's different than a lease. Even it's just a subscription, because I'm seeing owners that are really on top of member experience, treating their equipment, especially cardio, as a subscription. It's just just move it out. EOS does that too. EOS is doing this too. They just say after so much, just new stuff, keep it rolling. And I do think that really is incredibly supportive of the member experience and maintaining it. Plus, if your competitors keep upgrading, that's where people start to really think something's old. They travel,
Right.
Yeah.
Come in and suddenly stuff looks dated. I want to, and Matt, unless there's anything else you want to add, or Jenny, you want to jump in, I want to see if we have any questions. I'll bring Bear on here and see if there's any questions, but
I think we could there's so much more to discover with Matt and him and his team and his story. I'm just throwing this out there, but we might need to do a part 2.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Very kind.
I would love to do a part 2 on this. Man, if you get a chance to go to Rochester and you need to visit Matt's club, there was a pretty funny, it was earlier, well, it was maybe halfway through last year when some online blogger guy that goes
I was
out.
going to bring that up.
Yeah, goes out and looks at gyms. Hey, this is the gym we're going to look at. Walks into Rochester. It was on. It's an awesome. Was that on? Where did that show up? Because I've used that.
TikTok, and it was trying out new gyms part 4.
Trying out new gyms part 4 on TikTok, and it's awesome. I don't know how many views it had by the time we got it, but that's when you know you've got it down, is when people can come in and we tell that story and say, they didn't get lucky. He didn't come in and have a great experience in there because it happened to be a good day. The folks at the rack are always on. And that's.
You didn't even know he was coming in, right?
We didn't know until we were made aware. My daughter showed me, and we already had he had 400,000 views by the time we became aware of it. And I just told my team when we went through it, I said, this is exactly shows the importance of being show ready whenever anybody comes in.
Talk about marketing. I mean, wow, like, because we've used it. I've used it in some of our stuff. Jason's used it. Blair's used it. Like this is when you get it right, and it's a natural part of your who you are. I mean, this is, I loved it. So talk about free marketing.
Yeah, and we sent him a little thank you package with some branded stuff after, just as a thank you, because and it took a little while to track him down, but it was just really nice of him to do that. And it wasn't done on purpose, but it ended up being really great.
Yeah.
Well, this also, this is,
Love it.
we talk about, and I show that in context, especially when we're talking about Marketing Rebellion, the book Marketing Rebellion, Mark Schaefer, you control about 1/3 of the story about you out there, and that's your paid advertising, and people don't generally believe that. They need proof points, and everybody else controls the narrative on your brand and you. About 2/3 of that comes from others, and this is the perfect example of that. And to get it right and have it probably has 1 million views by now or something.
Yeah, I don't know.
And you didn't and you didn't have to pay anything. Didn't have to pay anything for that. Yeah.
I think there's questions, Blair.
What's that?
I think we have questions.
Okay, let's Bear, let's go to questions.
Okay.
Pick his brain.
Question on the screen here?
Yes.
Yeah. All right, cool. Thanks for the example on how to assess cardio equipment. Curious, do you have a process for deciding which new equipment types to invest in?
I do. So our process typically involves, so we know the cycle we're on when we sign the lease. We know that we're at a 48-month lease or whatever we sign. We've settled into that. So the URSA, before the lease is up, I bring usually our fitness director, our fitness technician, the general manager, assistant general manager, and myself, and we spend our focus of the trade show going to each and every single one of the larger manufacturers. Has to be large enough to do the whole line, so that the member experience is the same. And Precor, we've happened to choose Precor the last 3. Precor this last time during the pandemic brought us there to show the line because they knew that things were going to change. But really, it's important to bring the people who interact directly with the members on the equipment and get their buy-in, because you don't want them to come around and say, those guys made that decision.
Right.
It needs to be we chose this.
And it looks to me like the incumbent has a real advantage in this.
The incumbent has a really good advantage because they have what the members are used to.
Right.
And so the pain of changing on the base for the member experience, the gain has to be significant enough to overcome that pain of everybody needs a new password. Everybody needs to, download a new app and get used to different things. Now, should the equipment not keep up and be easy to maintain, and the equipment has to be available for members. That's first and foremost. So if that slides, then we will look at other stuff. But the incumbent does have an advantage.
So let's talk about strength for just a second here, because recently you made well, I'm not going to say made a shift, but you took on a new innovative strength line. And can you tell us about that decision and that product and what the feedback has been on that?
Sure. So we just put in a pretty full line of e-gym strength equipment. We launched it early February in our club. So we've had it a couple of months now, and we've almost onboarded 1,000 members already onto it.
What?
Yeah, crazy. My team has worked really hard at that. And the important part of that decision is we have to find a way to include the members who are already here in the process. It's not just about introducing new members to it. That's foolish. You still want to introduce new members, but it's best to keep the ones you already have happy. So getting them and giving them the opportunity to get on there, basically it's a one-on-one opportunity for every trainer to meet with a member. We've started to do groups because it's been a little more popular, where we have 3 trainers and 5 people. But what it really does is it hyper personalizes the member's experience on that equipment. It gets set to their size. So the levers move where they need to, the seats move where they need to. They do a strength test every 6 workouts so that it progresses as they progress, rather than, you know, meeting with the personal trainer for an orientation and doing the same exercises for a year, the same weight for a year. Our members get to progress and it tracks through it. So we ended up, typically with strength equipment, we purchase it because it lasts a little bit longer than cardio equipment. So we've got a full line of hoist. We have a full line of Hymer strength and life fitness. But this e-gym, we put it off in its own studio, and it's a circuit, and it just works. And our members so far love it. The experiences, we haven't heard negative feedback. In fact, we hear, when are you getting another line? And I'm like, let's just give it a little bit. We're going to let the honeymoon end and see. But what's cool about it is it queues and people go around, and you'll see 3 to 4 people waiting in line on a busy time, but they know I'll be on my first piece of equipment and get to go in a cycle in about 5 minutes. So they understand. And so there's no frustration. There's no waiting on equipment. It's amazing stuff. And we looked at it 3 years ago, pre-pandemic. And then it just was too difficult to invest in during the pandemic, but it was certainly top of mind, and one of the first things we looked at URSA this year.
I'm sure Dana Milkey is probably going to do a recording of this and then be immediately saying, "Hey, you need another one."
Well,
he'll be calling you. Yeah,
he can call me. He just better sharpen his pencil.
Yeah. Perfect. That's 2 awesome examples of aligning that equipment around customer experience, given the process. I like that you cycle it in. You guys know when you're going to have to be at URSA to do the buy. You're a year and a half ahead of it. That's awesome. Yeah.
The other thing, about that equipment, that was, I'm blanking at the moment, so I'll have to apologize and come back, have the thought come back to me. So go on. Sorry.
Okay. Bear, other questions?
Yeah, so the next one, Jeremy from Plainfield, Illinois. For Blair, do you see any member experience trends developing that club owners should be getting ahead of? I have a new club opening across town, and I want to set a pace for what a member can expect from a gym in our town.
Yeah, I mean, and I think Matt, Jenny, you guys could probably speak to this too. Some of the biggest member experience trends we've seen in the last 5-6 years, and it continues, is locker rooms as a luxury, locker rooms as sort of an exclamation point to the end of the workout, locker rooms as should feel like a reward. It shouldn't feel like you're going into a prison locker room at the end of your workout. It makes a big difference in keeping members there. So. And they don't have to be giant if you're not a big club. They have to be well appointed and nice and feel modern, and you have to think a lot about the member experience when you're designing the locker room and where people stand and when they have clothes on and when they don't, and you have to be very thoughtful about that. Rochester went through a major locker room renovation in 3 phases. I think you did it in thirds. And then the second thing I'll say, and then I'll have you guys jump in here. And this, Jeremy, you probably already know this, but anything that has to do with recovery, starting to move towards recovery, whether it's Theragun, whether it's stretch there, fascia stretch, whether it's, hydro massage, or that is just,
Cryotherapy.
yep. That's all getting bigger and bigger. And Matt or Jenny, do you guys have anything you'd add there?
Go ahead, Matt.
The only thing I would kind of add is maybe having some space for social social spaces in the club for people
Yeah.
to, especially after the last 2 years, have a couple of tables where people could sit down and catch up or just socialize, because that's such a huge part of wellness that we all kind of lost during the pandemic. So having some social spaces, and you're right, designing the locker rooms with intent. We don't have mirrors on any of the ends of the locker bays that face the hallway, because we don't want people in the hallway dressing themselves or doing that. We designed kind of the flow, and that's where hiring an architect who's familiar with the club industry will make a difference.
I like that example. Great example. Bear, other questions? Do we have more questions?
Can I pick up my drop thought real quick? Sorry.
Yeah. Go
All
ahead.
I was going to say about eGym is we included it in membership. You can upcharge for that, but we did that with the intent of, we had a higher than normal price increase due to all of, the labor shifting, the utilities. So by giving members something in addition for that price increase, that also minimized any negative feedback we got about that.
Nice. Okay. Well, how big was your price increase?
6% across the board, every member.
Awesome. And the rack rate went up 6% also?
6% on everything. Yeah, on all our members pay the same dues. Every year they go up for us typically. So they all adjusted 6%.
Nice.
Roughly.
Good. Bear, any other questions? Okay.
Yeah. So was there any pushback from other management members? And Matt, this is going to be for you, around the profit of being split between employee and company rather than at all or most going back to the club? If so, how did you get them on board with the reward pool?
Well, I was by other management, I'm assuming maybe owners, the other people who might feel some attachment to the money. I'm thankful to say that when we created it, it was my dad, myself, and another long-term partner who's been in the business for 20 years. And they understand the importance of taking care of the right people the right way in order for the business to run the way as an owner we want it. When you can take and grow your profit by 333% in 8 years because of the team, the owners got more money as a result, even though we tended to feed it back into the club during that stretch. But we renovated almost our entire facility from 2012 to 2022 out of cash flow for the most part. We financed $1 million for the locker room. That was it. But we were debt free a month before the pandemic. We got into the pandemic, but I'm grateful we were. And I'm happy to say we're now debt free again as the start of this year. So but it was really just the importance of taking care of your people will return more in spades as an owner.
That's very John Senegal-ish, if you remember John or Jim, who's CEO of Costco. And he said, basically, we maintain 15% margin, 15% margin, 15% margin, and shareholders would try to push him. But if you paid people less, if you had worse healthcare, then you could have a high, and he would keep saying, you don't get it. The reason we're as profitable as we are is because of this rule that we apply. If we start to make more than that, we're not paying people enough, and we're going to be vulnerable to other people in the market. He was adamant about that. And of course, we know Costco's been wildly successful.
Well, and as owners, we got what we targeted for profit for the year. This is what's above and beyond that goes 50-50. So we already got what we were hoping for, if there's an incentive to be had.
Yep. Bear, anything else there?
Yeah, we do. The next question is from Carly from Mobile. When I talk mission statements with my team, I often see eyes glazing over and a general lack of interest. How do you get people excited about working toward your common goal?
The levers that Blair talked about earlier, and actually strategizing with intent and rewarding when you see those things. You know, activities that support the mission statement get rewarded here, get called out, get thanked. And sometimes it's just recognition that people realize you're watching them and appreciate the job they're doing. It can be as simple as that. It doesn't have to be a chainsaw, you know, as a gift or whatever, but just you want to reinforce the behavior you want to see.
You know, one thing that I heard you say too, Matt, is that I think is hugely impactful is you said that when you do your associate onboarding or training or your meeting, you use current data. So it's like you bring in current screenshots, you bring in current comments, you bring in, you know, from all of the various pieces. And it's not this document that was created 5, 10, you know, even 6 months ago. That's just like, you know, everybody's like paying lip service to. This is something that you've taken the time, which speaks volumes to those new associates, right? Like, you know, this is how important it is that you're taking time to update the materials, but it's current, it's living and breathing. I think that's huge.
One thing, go ahead, Matt.
So our general manager does that, it's, you know, and again, that's part of teamwork. And we make sure that we are pulling positives and negatives from several different departments. We're not pulling all negatives from the locker room. We're not pulling only, so you have to spread it around. So you just have to strategize when you're doing those things.
The other thing I'd add for Carly is when I hear the comment that eyes glazing over, general lack of interest, I sense that maybe you're not putting enough hard edges when you're talking about your mission statement. In other words, if my mission statement is member experience first, then I should be, when I'm training that, I should engage conversations with the people I'm training around examples. I can take comments from my system, or I can create my own case study, mini case study, and give an example of, okay, let's say we have a member who's 65 and is, you know, come in for their 4th visit and this has happened. Now let's take this member experience first, and now let's apply it to this. Now you guys, you 5 get together over here and tell me how you would handle this. And so when I hear the eyes glaze over piece, sometimes there's not enough. The mission statement feels a bit uncoupled from my daily actions. And what you need to do is pull that mission statement right back to my daily actions, give practical examples, let them think of those examples. And I guarantee you will have so much more energy around it than talking in what. So when I see that, it feels like a little vague. In other words, maybe you're talking about the mission statement a little vague, Carly.
And make sure the mission statement resonates with them, because that 16-word one we used to have was to create member enthusiasm by providing service that exceeds member expectation. That's going to make your eyes glaze over. We took it and put member experience first. That's memorable.
Yeah.
This stuff is so teachable. And hey, Bear, I'm gonna pull out a question that just came in on the chat from Elaine and Gerald.
Go ahead.
Is the 50% of net incentive plan available to frontline staff or just managers, directors? Could you give further examples of how the structure is split, if so?
So it is split into essentially 4 buckets. A chunk goes to the executive team, a chunk goes to the directors, a chunk goes to key staff. And by key staff, it's our full-time maintenance, our full-time business office, the managers on duty. So we do not go down into the part-time, and that's where that 10% that goes into the reward pool is so important. That allows us to do those things for the front line when they're warranted. But it's so hard because we have some employees who teach a couple hours a week at a group fitness class, and they impact positively or negatively 40 to 80 members, right? Versus somebody who's working 10 hours a week at the front desk, and they interact with so many more members, but the quality and the time spent on that group exercise or group fitness is more important. It just got too hard to qualify. So we really tried to focus on the areas that we knew we could measure and impact.
And when you get at those frontline roles, you don't have to use it. Remember, we talked about 4 things: rewards, awards, incentives, and recognition. instead of the incentive piece, Elena, you could use, rewards and recognition could go a lot further at that front line than incentive could.
And that's what we use that reward money for. Yep.
To buy personalized and just, by the way, handwritten notes are a huge thing. Just get logoed cards that are blank in the middle and handwrite a note to those employees, and don't hand it to them and mail it to their home. I guarantee that's recognition that people would love. And we're coming up on an hour here. I want to call out somebody that's actually on here also watching, and it's Trey McLean from Be Fit by Bob's. And we had him on one of the first webinars, and we're talking about money on the ground. And I just love, and then to be here with Rochester Athletic Club, we had EOS Fitness in between. I feel like we've had such incredible quality in our customers. And this idea that we've always had, part of the vision of MXM, is this idea of cross-pollinating ideas and behaviors and getting all of our customers to continue to get better and better. And by extension, hopefully our industry to get better and better and not lose as many people as we lose every year. So bear with that here at exactly 11:01 now.
Hey, Blair, we have one question I want you to answer. I'd like you to answer before we hop off, if you don't mind, real quick. It's maybe the most important one. You had me at chili. Can you briefly tell us your favorite chili recipe?
I'll tell you my favorite chili recipe.
One that has salt.
No, it's not a simple question.
And I think I got to give, I don't remember, Matt, somebody on our roundtable gave it to me. I think it might have been Scott Gillespie that gave me, and it was called the world's best chili recipe. And Jackie makes it, and she does just a phenomenal job. Here's what I'll tell you. The three key ingredients in it are beer, chocolate, and something
Onion.
else.
Wow.
Coffee, beer, chocolate, and coffee. And it is phenomenal there. So there's my favorite chili recipe. And you have to have enough salt in it.
Told you it wouldn't be easy.
All right. Matt.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah,
You're
absolutely.
awesome.
Thank you.
Tell Brent, tell the team we said hi.
Hi, Brent and Sarah.
Yep.
They're
Thanks.
the magic behind they make it all work.
I only get tired of Brent kicking my ass on the golf course, though. So.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for tuning in.
Everybody. All right.